you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor, and joining me as ever is the interesting Ian Hardingham.
Hello, Mr. Paul Kilduff-Taylor. I have very often been accused of being released too early and it needing DLC to complete me.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
There were a couple of articles posted this week about the future of esports on television. Apparently, the CW will be broadcasting Machinima's reality series Chasing the Cup, whose upcoming season will be about the Mortal Kombat 10 Pro League. Do you think programs about esports stand a better chance than televised matches?
I just think they're different genres. I don't think they're particularly similar. I think that reality shows are cool, and there's an advantage that reality shows have above match coverage in that. I think one of the biggest problems with esports is that you don't get to see people's faces enough. You don't get the human drama as much as you do with some other sports, I'd say. And obviously that's not a problem in reality shows because all they're doing is showing you someone's face as they get beaten and look very upset about it and then get shouted at by their team leader. And that's all very nice. So I just think they're different. I don't think that the success or otherwise of a reality show or multiple reality shows about esports is going to really change my opinion about whether esports themselves as a spectator sport is going to take off.
Sure, I think that's fine. I think reality shows are a good way for TV to get into esports now because of the thing you mentioned, the human drama, the human element. You know, you can make almost anything interesting if you're rooting for the person who's trying to do it. So I feel like now in an interim time, especially when TV is so dominated by shows in this format, that it's actually quite a good thing that networks are going in this direction rather than showing random instances of different matches. We saw that announcement that ESPN, their latest venture, is going to be showing Halo, which is certainly a niche esport, if not a micro niche esport. So maybe this is an easier thing for TV to understand.
Yeah, I'm sure it could be used as a gateway drug. Increasing the visibility of pro gaming is brilliant. Whenever it happens, that's going to be good. Sure, I mean, I think I think the idea that this might work speaks to the general continuing further acceptance of gaming in our society, and educating people that there are pro gamers is good. I've watched documentaries about pro chess players in the past, and that's always been interesting. Sometimes I'm surprised how competitive some scenes can be. That seem like Scrabble, for instance. I read a really interesting article about that. Didn't really know anything about competitive Scrabble before, so I think that's good. It still feels a little bit orthogonal to me about whether, you know, the thing that I really care about, am I going to be able to log onto a TV channel and see a game being played well casted by professional commentators with the right kind of production and happening fast enough? That's really what I want to see, and this still doesn't feel that related to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One of the things, we drew this topic from an article by Rob Zacny called The Complicated, Messy Future of Esports, which I thought was really good. It's a good general look across all the different genres of esports, and I'm really glad that Rob Zacny is the guy on the case for this. He says he's going to be writing some more stuff in a similar vein in future, and I think this is what we need. We need intelligent people, intelligent journalists within games to take an overview of esports and really kind of break it down, because I think there's only so much you can learn from individual esports and their communities, and there's also very little you can learn from this kind of very bland, kind of knowledgeless overview of stuff that people are doing, kind of the sort of thing we do. There's only very limited information you can draw from that, and I think we really need to start seeing, the differences in some esports. I've always found it a bit odd that fighting games, for example, have been lumped in with strategy games. They're so very different as a sport, so they're just by virtue of the fact that they're both electronic, they're in the same category, I think is a bit strange, and that kind of thing is very important for how esports are viewed. I mean, you've said this thing a lot about seeing people's faces. In most fighting game tournaments, you see their faces almost all the time now, especially in things like Smash, where they'll have a camera on the players at all times, and that relates very directly to them. And within those communities, almost all of the drama is about the people playing the game, because a lot of the matches play out in kind of a similar way. So there are these nuances to esports that I think haven't been captured yet, and so more intelligent investigation is needed.
Yeah, sure. And there's also the point, which is that I think you told me this week that there's a lot of sentiment out there that young people really don't watch TV much anymore, and they're watching Let's Players and stuff on Twitch all of the time. So there's a certain extent to which I don't know if old people like us will really know what it looks like when pro sports takes off, because it being on one of the ESPN channels doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right.
When I think about how these millennials and even the sub-millennials are consuming their content, they're watching a lot of the stuff in the kind of ways that are their analogous versions of me switching on the TV and going to a random channel and seeing stuff. So I still don't really know whether... I don't know what the signs are going to be. I still want to see a lot more popular Twitch channels. Like, I want to see, 10 million people watch a cast. That'd be great, but 10 million is an awful lot. I mean, 1 million would be great. The thing is, it feels like sort of TV is going down. There's a graph, and TV's trending downwards, and all of these electronic internet media are trending upwards, and it's going to be just even harder because of that to work out what counts as being successful, not being successful. On a purist level, I kind of think it's a bit like patronizing that we have to try this reality show about playing StarCraft or whatever, because actually showing StarCraft isn't working. I really like the purity of actually seeing a StarCraft match, but I mean, people like watching that stuff as well. Maybe it will be a gateway drug. And also, I've been thinking this week, the speed at which new games are released. The number of games that last for 10 or 15 years is very small. How does that fit into this whole thing? Like, if you've got games that are only going to be around for a couple of years, and there's nothing wrong with that, what is the right coverage for that? I still think that a channel, in inverted commas, that finds a good way of showing a good mix of new stuff and old stuff is a good idea, but then that's just what Let's Players do. So I don't even know what I'm looking for, apart from something that's basically old-fashioned.
I think what you've said, it really seems like you're kind of in agreement with me now, because I've always felt that this represents a change in the way things are consumed, not the legitimization of something that existed. So it didn't feel like esports was this kind of pre-existing thing that has become legitimate. It's just now that there are good ways of giving people access to it through Twitch. So now that you have that, you're right, there are new things like, what do we do with the stuff that's popular for 6 months? And how does that get integrated? Does that just have its own community? Does it have some crossover from some people generally being on Twitch? I mean, this idea of the channel, the way of bringing things together, the way that people get to that stuff now is a bit like the old kind of flicking around the channels on the remote. You're on Twitch, the thing you want to watch isn't on, so you watch something else, you watch something different. So that's kind of how discoverability seems to work there. Whether there is scope for this better integration of all of these minor things together, I think there probably is. I think that there are a lot of things that Twitch and people who make content on Twitch should learn from existing broadcasting, but that's already happening at an enormous rate. I mean, if you just look at the difference between production quality of sort of shoutcasting in, 5 years ago versus, full-on video production in studios, etc. now, that's happening at a great rate, so we don't need to worry about that. But yes, it's the next thing is, how do we cope with the changing, fluctuating nature of these things that appear and then disappear?
Yeah, listening to you talk has definitely helped me coalesce an opinion about this. And I think it is all about discoverability. I think that this content belongs on a service like Twitch.
Yeah.
And it's not going to start drawing new, really genuinely new sets of viewers until whichever service that is much bigger. We've talked about how Netflix was able to push to us a documentary, Making a Murderer, not the kind of thing that I would have gone out to find on my own. It's not the kind of thing I would have subscribed to a different service to get. But because I was following Netflix basically has the ability to push new things at me. 30 years ago, it was the BBC or ABC or NBC. They had the ability to push new things at me because I was watching their channel. And that was how I had discoverability sort of across wider genres. So, we can go on and on about how it would be great if BBC Three was successful in pushing StarCraft 2 matches or Counter-Strike matches to new groups of people, but what's really going to happen next is that there'll be something, and it could well be Twitch, which becomes good enough for a much larger number of people to use. And for me, I know you kind of often disagree a bit with this. For me, it's still about usability, something that these services are lacking. Anyway, whatever happens, something will get much bigger acceptance as a way of watching a certain kind of content, and then that will have the ability to push new things at you, because I still think that Netflix should try doing live events, just because Netflix is huge and live events are huge. But it may well not be Netflix, and if it's Twitch 3.0, then I think that could be where you finally manage to push this into some people who never thought they'd ever be watching pro gaming.
Yeah, you're right. Live events is definitely something that I'm sure Netflix are at least considering it, but it really has a different quality. And we know there's all these examples of people being, paying money for live events, boxing and so on. Wrestling is a big one in the kind of more geek community. A lot of people now are pay-per-view, these big, pro wrestling tournaments and so on. So there's definitely that there. I really agree. I mean, I think the major problem with Twitch is discoverability. My endless rants about how bad the apps are for various platforms are boring. We don't need to have them again. The front page of Twitch, I think, is a good place, but often the stuff they put on there isn't so good. So I kind of feel like the content for that more general esports audience is slightly still missing. I do think that there's some things that can be done there. We are seeing more gaming talk shows. I mean, if you look at someone like Day9, who started off doing just StarCraft instructional stuff, which was obviously for a very niche audience, that's the audience who are seriously trying to get better at multiplayer StarCraft, and is now a personality in his own right who can cover any game or do almost anything within that field. He does board games, he does a Magic the Gathering show, he does all that stuff just because he's liked as a personality. That kind of thing is the stuff that's going to grow, and I feel like it will come out of Twitch. But we really do need, I feel like a lot of these things stop innovating after they get a foothold. Netflix has done that, Twitch has done it, and they need to do the Amazon thing where you get your foothold and then you just expand and dominate everything. You try new business areas until one of them works.
This tertiary content, like chat shows about gaming or news roundup shows, they seem to me that they are a symptom of when something's really big enough to have a lot of people who want that kind of tertiary content. And that kind of, to a certain extent, is true of these reality shows as well, although I understand that there are other things that can be tertiary too. So I still feel I still want there to be this thing that doesn't exist of these massive league that everyone can get around. I love Rob Zacny as much as you do, maybe even slightly more, Paul Kilduff-Taylor. But he did say something here which I kind of disagreed with. He talked about how negatively people viewed the idea of their coalescing a big League of Legends or Counter-Strike league that stopped the teams in that league competing in other leagues. Now, I'm afraid I think that's probably a positive development. We need more coalescing in our lives right now. We need some stuff to come together, a bit more money to be in one place that isn't necessarily just because Riot or Blizzard have put the money there. So we can start getting a bit of a bigger stuff going on, more expensive stuff going on, and I think exclusivity is going to be required for that. I don't think that's a negative, I think that's a positive.
That's difficult because it definitely hurts fans in the short term. Because you see this in StarCraft, they've really tightened up the rules for WCS, or whatever that's called now, which is the Blizzard-run sort of year-long tournament. And that means that you don't see good players from all the regions competing in the other tournaments, which fans might like more, which might have better production, which might have better casting, which might have better everything. So, you look at the lineup for DreamHack. If you're used to watching 4 DreamHacks a year, that's suddenly a lot worse just because of something Blizzard did. On the other hand, I agree with you. You do need some consolidation. You need bigger tournaments. But the problem is you're not going to get buy-in from the community on that when you're actively hurting their enjoyment right now.
I mean, it just feels to me like there has to be something that becomes popular because it's good, and then that's the point at which you have this mild contraction, which, sure, I suppose in the short term can be classed as bad, but like to get to the next state, to get enough energy to cross over the hump and be something else. Like, it may just not be until you can get the the guaranteed participation of these very popular teams, it may just not be that you can't guarantee enough money, etc., to go to the next level, whatever the next level is. So yeah, I totally understand it would be nice if these teams would continue to play every single tournament, but I think if you take like a long-sighted view, it might be a year and a half of getting things together where things are a bit worse, but then I would expect it to be much better after that.
I think the problem is that the best thing may not win for the fans, so the developer, publisher-run tournaments may not be the tournaments they want to see become the biggest one, especially as some of those things have been really mismanaged in the past. So, again, that's just... It's not just that it's not sort of abstractly bad.
I don't think it should be the publisher, developer controlled ones, because, as you imply, they don't have the same kind of incentive to do things properly. They have a whole other load of incentives.
Right.
And actually making money is not generally, directly, it's not generally one of their primary incentives here. It's making money somewhere else is what their primary incentive is. So this is a real problem. And whenever I think about this, I try and work out if there's any kind of analogy for the fact that Riot made the game, they own the game, with anything else. I mean, the FA or whatever, or the NFL, they pretty much own football, to a certain extent. They can execute rules changes if they want to, but it just doesn't seem to make much sense as an analogy. So it does seem like it's hurting things. Although, without the money from the primary companies, I just don't know if we would be where we are even. Yeah. So it just feels to me like it's a very difficult situation. We all want there to be enough money and enough interest for a third party to really want to get involved with a huge amount of venture capital. It's just not happening right now.
Yeah, I think that the problem is, yes, if consolidation does happen, it's only going to be those things right now. They're the only people who have the clout to do it, the developers. So that's why generally it's seen as a bad thing. But I still think your argument is valid. I still think it needs to happen on some level. So it's just, as Zachney says, it's another thing that has to be worked out.
I mean Amazon are desperately trying to gain foothold in the Netflix market, and they own Twitch. They're a company that could decide to put an awful lot of money out of trying to make themselves the primary pro gaming platform. They could rival those other companies. I'm kind of interested by the idea of what it would be like if on Amazon Prime Video, whatever it's called, you could access yesterday's StarCraft highlights as one of the sections. That would be really weird.
Yes.
But for me, it feels like you need a company that's trying to make a new delivery method, and they've got loads of money, and they decide that this is something that's worth punting as being their exclusive. Because, apart from that, there's no way you're going to get enough money to battle Activision for the rights.
Yeah, the future of this is still very much in question, but I am very much looking forward to the next era of this, when I can watch the sort of weekly CS roundup show and not have to hunt out these tournaments and keep jumping into the middle of them and then go and look up loads of stuff about teams in order to have that contiguous experience. I definitely think that will come. But you're right, that is more of a signal that the size of it has grown to a certain level than something people need to be doing now, particularly. It's just the overall quality of stuff on Twitch is getting better, but not quite in the right way. It's still massively dominated by streams that are just someone's monitor when they're playing a lot of a game and them talking to their idiot friends on Skype. Like that's fine. You know, if you're a teenager and you like that and you sort of aspire that, you know, that could be your life, that you'll forever be in your bedroom talking to your idiot friends on Skype playing League of Legends, that's cool. I can imagine having felt like that at one point in my life. That's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But it's not going to be the thing that takes us forward into the next level.
Yeah, it's just that Twitch isn't well curated yet.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that you look at all the successful mechanisms by which you get content nowadays, they're all sort of much more curated than that. I mean, Steam's trying to be less curated, but it's still doing really well. And obviously, Netflix and Amazon, you're talking about real TV from real TV companies.
Yeah.
I still feel a little bit like the successful version of this is going to be the company that has like a minimum quality level on the stuff it has, finds a good middle ground between stuff being of a significantly higher quality and also having like enough content, because that's what Twitch has going for it. It's got content all of the time. That's kind of my guess of what will break through.
Before we leave this, here's something interesting that I found about Twitch. Twitch is terrible for watching highlights or recorded broadcasts or VODs in the terminology of the gamer. So I missed all of AGDQ this year, the speedrunning charity stream. I missed all of it because I was working. I didn't have time to watch it. I wasn't doing the right kind of work to have it on in the background. So I missed all of it, and I normally watch it every year. If I now try and go back to watch it, I can look at the VOD, which is like 6 hours long, and I start it, and there's the thing where it's just an empty room, and they're waiting for people to start, and I just think, I don't want to be skipping through this. Some people have indexed it, and you can go to a Reddit thread and like click on the game you want, and for some reason that feels bad as well. But I realised the reason it's this bad is there's literally no incentive for anyone at Twitch to do it, because their system is not designed for delivering recorded video. YouTube is designed for that. So even if they spent a lot of time doing things, automated systems to export to YouTube well, or they had people going through curating it, putting it on YouTube, that doesn't benefit them because it takes people away from Twitch. So actually, because they can't build this entire content network to do VODs well, they're disincentivized from doing VODs well. And that's a really weird and bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly bad. I like the idea of a delivery platform that's mainly focused on live stuff. Live stuff's really popular. But you shouldn't write off the ability to show reruns of it at all.
Yeah, I mean, you do have that, but it's because of the format that it is. It's always a bad experience, and it's hard to find them, it's hard to browse for them, it's hard to use them. And I just wonder, like, is it worth them investing in like the whole YouTube infrastructure just to keep people on the site? Was I wrong about that? It just doesn't seem like it would be.
I have no idea. I don't know how much it costs to make video on demand work well. I think it costs a lot. I don't know if you have to be as good as YouTube, but...
Forbes have published a list of 29 games banned from being shown on Twitch. Included on the list are the usual titles such as Rayplay, but also, somewhat surprisingly, Fahrenheit, Indigo Prophecy and Manhunt 2. Is the issue of offensive content only going to get worse for Twitch?
I'm sure it is. It's nice to revisit this. There are some pretty weird games on here. A lot of them are pretty obviously, basically trolling in terms of how unbelievably offensive they are.
Yeah.
And I just want to give I know you've already used it, I want to give a trigger word warning here, because later on in this segment I may read a section of this article, which is pretty amazing. A couple of these are pretty surprising that they would be banned. Manhunt 2, that's an actual game. But I think the one that we really need to take issue here with is Second Life.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to stream Second Life on Twitch. I'm pretty offended by that.
Yeah, that's a bad decision, I think. I mean, the problem is Second Life is a disaster now. I mean, which is such a shame. This is really like, I feel like they need to sort this out and have an adults only category, because we're in a time now where you don't really have things that are sort of banned from TV anymore, particularly. Like, there isn't that thing of stuff being banned. That feels like a very retro retrogressive view of culture. So I really feel that they need some way of putting in some kind of adult-only gate that they're happy with, that parents are happy with, and then you just allow people to put this stuff on there. Like, I feel like banning it from your service is the wrong thing, but then maybe, I don't know how extreme some of this stuff is. By the names, I'm guessing it's pretty extreme.
I mean, I think plenty of these games, footage from them wouldn't be allowed on normal TV. I think you're right. It does seem a bit retrogressive to ban things, but the point is that no one got anywhere near a TV studio's headquarters with stuff like Battle Raper in the past, so it's never really an issue. I genuinely do find it surprising that Second Life is banned, because for me, the thing that Twitch doesn't want is to be a porn channel. That's the main thing it doesn't want. So you don't want things that are basically designed to be titillating, or whatever the more advanced word of titillating is. That's, I think, the thing that most clearly don't want. So a lot of these games are absolutely designed to get incite a certain feeling in humans, which I don't think Twitch wants to be peddling. But Second Life isn't that. Second Life is just bizarre, and all of its penises are kind of ironic in nature. And I think that's surprising that I can't go and watch Second Life on Twitch. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with the ones that are obviously ridiculous, but there are so many of these hentai games. Yeah. And I don't know where you draw the line. They all look basically offensive, but sort of kind of prettily drawn to me, and just kind of ludicrous. I remember one of the first DS games I got was called Sprung, which was a pretty funny hentai game, and they were all like, men smoking cigars in gentlemen's clubs would call them harmless fun. I don't know the extent to which they're actually harmless fun, but they're kind of silly. I'm sure they're on some level eating away at the fabric of society, but it's an interesting list of titles.
I guess you're saying that you need to have a ban list. Like, is that your position? Like, you have to have some games that are just banned.
I think that given that you probably can't ban the thing that you actually want to ban, which is stuff that's sort of sensual in the wrong way, I think it's probably you're less likely to get in trouble just banning individual games than banning like concepts.
Well, they have all these rules about like what people can wear and stuff.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So I kind of wonder if banning the concepts is a better idea. I mean, this is actually really difficult. I think this is really complicated. I'm just trying to think. If I was running the service, or we were running the service, we probably would have a ban. Like, it just seems like the most. Even though I feel ideologically that it's wrong, I think it's the only pragmatic solution, because you can't. Then you just get people arguing about your definitions or whatever, and you have to be ludicrously specific with definitions, which not only is sort of a bit hilarious, but it's also very difficult. So you probably just would go on there and you'd see this thing that people were complaining about, and you'd go, oh yeah, that's terrible. Right, we'll ban that game. We'll just stop this. That's probably all you can do, and that seems a bit sad.
I just don't know what this fictional eventual competitor I was talking about earlier, what they would do about this. Like, if you're trying to be more mainstream, I don't think the right thing to do is be like, yes, we definitely will show these random raping games. But I do wonder, with this becoming such an important part of how games are marketed, there probably is like a section of games which are just about artistically valid, that are going to have difficulty with selling to people because they're not allowed on these services.
Maybe what will really happen is that there will just be an adults competitor that, like, in the same way that for naughty films there are YouTube competitors, there will be one for porn, basically, and that will just show everything.
Sure.
I think that's probably the most likely thing. And, I think at that point Twitch will be like, great, we don't have to deal with this stuff on our service anymore. We don't have to spend time writing endless lists of stupidly named games to ban. So I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Fair enough.
Creators of Payday 2 and Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons are to open a VR arcade in Los Angeles. Apparently, the arcade will be used to demonstrate their own special high-tech VR headset, known as the Star VR. Can VR bring the arcade back?
I don't know. I added this topic because I know this is what you're hoping. You talked many times about having VR be the central aspect of the new rise of arcades. I think this is fine. I think this is basically quite a hubristic thing for Starbreeze, who have quite a lot of money right now, to be doing. But I might go. You know, I'm kind of much more interested in playing VR in someone else's space than my own.
Sure. I'm sad that this is their own technology. I
Yeah.
mean, come on, guys. Really? Like, there's just this category of company who tries to compete in a space that they have literally zero chance of being successful in. Literally zero. And I just don't know what combination of things it is that makes these companies do this stuff. I think it's just this really weird, as you say, hubristic thing. Like, it's just not going to work. You're not going to beat a company that's owned by Facebook, and you're certainly not going to beat Valve. So if this was like the Vive arcade in Seattle, most likely, then I would be more excited about it, because I think it might have some chance of success, but this is just a terrible idea.
Yeah, I hadn't really been focusing on that element of this. I mean, it is completely ridiculous that Starbreeze are making a kind of VR headset. I just don't understand it.
No.
In the same way that you don't. But I like the central concept, and maybe when their thing terribly crashes and burns, they'll start putting some real VR stuff in there.
Yeah, I think, yes, the thing I was excited about was stuff that would necessarily need space, and I think the initial versions of the Vive were like that. I don't know what the thing they're shipping is going to be like. Very interested to see that. But yeah, not everyone's going to have the room in their house was my idea, to do the full sort of 3D geometry located stuff. But this doesn't seem like the right fix to me.
Yes, no Starbreeze, no.
No. Mosh Davies has written his last early access column for Rock Paper Shotgun. After writing 57 evaluations of such games, he's come to the conclusion that nobody knows what they're doing. He believes that most developers don't have a strong enough idea of what they're making, and that customers often have an unrealistic view of what they're buying into. Has early access made any difference outside the survival genre?
I think early access is fine. I like early access. Early access gives you another launch. You know, we've talked endlessly about the great things for early access. Early access is great for developers, and when you use it in a good, responsible way like we do, everything's fine.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit surprised by some of Marsh's comments here. Excuse me. He says, sure, the boundaries between Barebones Alpha, Fantasist Unity Asset Store Piffle, and outright scam are porous indeed. But I think most of the time developers of these games don't understand what is reasonable to ask of a customer, what it is ethical to sell, or what they need to show in order to convince people that their game can reach the future they have promised. I just don't know if I necessarily agree with that. When I buy an early access game, I feel like I know what I'm going to get, and I think it often communicates quite well to me what it may be. What do you think about that?
I think that's what happens to you. I think a lot of people buy these games and they believe like everything that the developer's written in the thing. Like, they buy something that's made by like one 15-year-old guy and it says it's going to be an open world MMO, whatever, and they're like, wow, and they really believe that. I think it works for people who are able to understand what game development is like. It's fine, but for people who aren't, I still feel like it might be potentially confusing. I still think we've got quite a lot of big failures on the horizon from some of these titles that people got very excited about, the kind of ones that pop up in the Steam top 5 for a week and then disappear. Those are the ones I really worry about. So in totality, I think early access is not great. It just has some specific utility for some companies who use it well, and also some people who want to make money.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. That doesn't actually reflect my feelings on it, but you know, we have different sets of things that we look at sometimes. I still kind of really like the idea that there's this wild west of craziness that I can go and visit in Steam and occasionally get a game and see some interesting stuff in development, and that makes sense to me. I mean, no, I'm not happy if people are buying something based on a description that isn't realistic, and I'm not. I also don't doubt that's happening. But I think that's really sad if that's like an actual ethical problem that we have to deal with, because I think for the people who do it properly, it's really incredibly useful for us and better for our consumers as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it has utility for people who are who do, you know, the stuff that we do a paid beta that is solid and whatever, but the negative stuff that's associated with early access, I feel worse about this now than I used to, just because actually since we started doing the Steam top 10 on this show, it really shows you just how much of that is dominated by a lot of stuff, and as you look at it go by, you just think, hang on a minute, a lot of this is not going to deliver. And not only is that bad for people who bought into that, it's kind of bad for people who want to be more realistic about what they're promising and more actually develop a full and finished and complete product, it sort of almost throws that into some kind of shade in some way.
I mean, that's bad, and it kind of, as a claim, that makes sense. I still kind of just assumed that the people buying all these games that we feature in the top 10 are mainly people who see them being played by YouTubers and have a pretty clear idea about what the game is. Like, I don't know if... I just didn't assume that these guys were massively, like investing an amount of money that was important to them based on some promises. Like, I just always assumed it was kind of, here's this cool broken game. I like playing cool broken games. The YouTuber I like watching him play this cool broken game. And, I like the plans of where this can go. So I feel like I've got massively rose-coloured glasses on. I feel like I'm being way too optimistic.
I think that's true in a lot of cases. Like, don't get me wrong, for the bigger games that people play on early access, a lot of them are very fully featured, and are playable now. And that's always been our benchmark for beta stuff, is it good to play now, irrespective of the promises. But I do think it's a big aspect of why people like these games. We talked about this before, something in a broken state is more evocative because it shows the potential of what the dev can do. And I just feel like a lot of these things are going to hit the point where they don't live up to that promise, mostly because they can't. It's kind of almost a Star Citizen situation. So maybe there will be another sort of phase of backlash that's coming sort of a bit later, a bit further down the road. But I suppose this is just kind of how I feel, and also it's been coloured by reading this, as you say, slightly negative article. Like, I don't envy the journalist whose job it is to go through and find 3 early access games every week and then write about one of them. Like, that's definitely difficult at that rate. So, yeah, I suppose I take a slightly more negative view of it today.
Yeah, well, I'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see what we think next time we see a truly egregious early access game.
Ubisoft are killing Rainbow Six Siege, according to Rich Stanton. He believes that it's the best game they've made in years and has a real chance of becoming the next Counter-Strike. But the game is being held back by the confused strategy of having a premium price point and also F2P style paid for XP boosts. Should Ubisoft try and save Siege or instead work on a sequel?
I don't know if they should do either of those things. Let's start off with this next Counter-Strike business.
Sure.
I think Rainbow Six Siege looks extremely good, and I'm aware that the people who get into it think it's absolutely brilliant. It does feel, it certainly looks like it, and people say that it feels like an evolution of Counter-Strike in the right direction. It's got destructible terrain that's really meaningful without being imbalancing, and it really promotes great team play. But I just don't think it could ever have been the next Counter-Strike, and I'm just talking about a really minor point here. Or maybe the chance of it being out were just incredibly small. Counter-Strike is a juggernaut, and Valve got it well in hand. And I don't really know if anything has much of a chance of actually toppling it in the specific genre of Counter-Strike. Anyway, I'm going to move away from that quickly and try and talk about this actual topic. So basically, it looks like Rainbow Six Siege is a great game that was released with not enough content, certainly not enough single-player content. And now we're getting a lot of DLC added onto it. And I agreed with a lot of stuff Rich Stanton said here. And I think my core point here is something I said on Twitter, so you should follow me on Twitter, including you, Paul Kilduff Taylor, is it really doesn't matter what the DLC is. If your original game is amazing, people will buy anything as DLC. You can sell a dog that looks like a pony in a rainbow hat, and that'll make a lot of money. But if your original product isn't any good, it doesn't matter how good your DLC is, it's not going to make any difference. So it's always safest to just put as much content as you can into the original product and just sell weird idiocy as DLC, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that there's some sound stuff that this approach is based on, but I feel like they've just executed it incorrectly. There's nothing wrong with having good, expensive DLC, especially for a multiplayer game. I think that's fine. But the problem is with this, really, it just seems like I'm always a bit wary when enthusiast journalists take on a business topic. And Rich Stanton is being very intelligent here, but he may not have identified exactly what the problems with this are. It may actually all be priced fine, but it might sort of lean towards more of the gameplay side of things that he's talking about. That just might be where the emphasis is. Maybe this would work perfectly well if, for example, it didn't have terrible matchmaking and it didn't have, they hadn't chosen sort of slightly the wrong things to do as DLC. Always a bit careful with this kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. He talks about a lot of things, and I agree it's probably not every one of them together that causes the failure. I think my opinion is that it was too light on launch, and I think it's still really, really risky to make a multiplayer-only thing, especially a premium-priced multiplayer-only thing. I think that's just very hard to get right. I doubt price, in general, has much to do with it. But I think that, how are you going to get enough people to play a game? Maybe price has something to do with it. But anyway, I'm just rambling now. For goodness sake, Ian, get it together. I think that the reason I didn't buy Rainbow Six Siege was that all the reviews said, this is amazing, but only if you have a good team together in multiplayer. And I was like, no. I can't play a game that's only amazing in the mode that's like really hard to get going. Like, I want to get into it on my own to start with, and then I want to be able to play on public servers, and then if I'm really in love with this game, then maybe I'll get a good team together. So that's a real turn off. So that for me is the primary thing. He probably is focusing too much on the DLC and kind of getting it the wrong way round. I think they forced it to be released before Christmas. They would have benefited massively from having more time, and the DLC is kind of neither here nor there. It's really the issue that the game needed to be more fully featured on release.
I think strategically, if you look at this, it's really a kind of do everything approach, and that's generally always bad. So you have these boosts, you have these huge, kind of huge price, and you have all this DLC as well, like kind of restricted stuff in the main game. That really feels like this hodgepodge of ideas borrowed from F2P thought without any of the F2P stuff. For example, some of the points that Rich Stanton makes about Uplay and how bad that is. That kind of friction is the thing that F2P style metrics would help you eliminate, or would tell you to eliminate from your game. So I don't think you can, have your cake and eat it here. If you're going to do this stuff where you really need people to be spending a lot of money and buy in for a long time, you have to whittle down those things that are going to prevent them from doing that. And it doesn't seem like they're agile enough to actually do that.
Sure. But even with all of that said, I think the primary problem is that it's a premium priced game, and they just don't have enough customers, I don't think, to make this massively meaningful. And the fact they don't have enough customers is really the problem for them and for Rich Stanton. This is sort of what confuses me. It reminds me a bit of some of the stuff I always used to believe about user-generated content and games that focus too much on user-generated content. It's like, if you're going to make a game that's massively successful as a free-to-play game that's DLC supported, then there are two different things there. First, you've got to make it massively successful as a free-to-play game. You've got to get a lot of people playing. And then you've got to get your DLC strategy right? Like, I'm trying to work out, and this is really a tangent. If you take a great free-to-play game, and for some reason you didn't have any DLC, would it still be really successful? Is there ever a situation where the paid-for stuff is, like, driving this game being massively popular?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by DLC in that context, actually.
I kind of just mean, like, if you've got something like Clash of Clans, right? Mm-hmm. Would Clash of Clans be as popular if it was impossible to pay any money?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, then, it almost doesn't matter what your sort of DLC strategy is to start with.
Yeah.
Because, you've got to get that kind of level of success first. I feel like I'm making a bit of a weird point, but it's like, it's so complicated to make one of these things a success. You've got to get a huge number of people to like your game, which is really hard, and then you have to monetize them.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And if you're going to try and do that with a game that's premium priced already, then you're in trouble. I mean, shouldn't Ubisoft be caring about making this $50 game sell loads at launch than be worrying about, this DLC stuff afterwards?
Well, the problem is, though, that for these titles, if you're looking at something in that category, you're looking at your Call of Duties and so on, that the amount that they make from DLC is vastly important to the overall strategy, because they are so ludicrously priced to make anyway. So you really need the DLC to work, such is the nature of these things now. So I do understand why you're coming at this from the point of view that you're hoping and expecting the DLC to work, which is not sort of immediately obvious. It's just, the thing you're talking about is, in wonderful mobile terms, it's the UA versus monetization issue. It's about acquisition versus monetization. Some games get UA right and don't get monetization right, etc. And this just seems like I say, it is a confusion of where they should be focusing. I agree with you. They should be getting people to buy the damn game. Like, if it's a flipping $50 game, get people to buy that. That is still critical. but it does make sense that you are trying to bring in all this DLC as well.
No, sure. I'm just kind of, maybe the message is to the journalists. If the problem with a game is that it's not popular enough, that's kind of probably not the fault of the DLC. Like, yeah, sure, maybe your game has really offensive stuff in, and people love the first 3 minutes, but you've got paywalls too early or wait walls too early. You know, that's possible, but the most likely thing is the game just isn't good enough and isn't attaining well enough. So, like, criticizing the weird DLC, like, if there's $100 DLC, paying any attention to that is completely nonsense, really. It's just about if the free product isn't any good, it's nothing to do with the DLC.
I think that's true, and also I think this falls into the category of the kind of consumer rights stuff. Like, I think a lot of people, particularly on PC, are very, and correctly, very attuned to what their rights are as customers or what they feel they deserve as customers. For example, a game performing correctly, it should, and people are right to get annoyed about those things, particularly with servers and so on. But I think also when people feel affronted by some badly priced DLC, they will attribute the success or failure of the game to that. And I agree with you. I think there's a bit of that happening here. People are looking at all the things that are bad with this game and they're attributing the failure to the things they don't like as a customer, which is often true, but it's also often not true for different reasons. So it's pretty difficult to filter these things out unless you can really see what's going on. But clearly, there have been some bad mistakes made with this game. I was really interested in it pre-launch, and seeing what's happened to it afterwards has made me not interested in it at all. And I think that is meaningful, actually. Like, you want some positive buzz to be coming out at this point.
Sure. A tertiary point I have about this is that for a lot of these genres now, the number of players in your player base that it needs to be viable is like rocketing upwards. I've talked hundreds and hundreds of times about how one of the problems with Determinants, one of the many problems, was that it actually needed quite a lot of active players to be viable, because you needed to play, like, you needed to have a few people on a server to have a good time, and you needed people to be playing at the same time as you, obviously, and also vaguely in the same time zone because of lag. And we're only talking about needing an active player base of like a few hundred to make that work.
Yeah.
And these games that have big teams, they've still got the lag problem. You've got to have 5 players or whatever on each team. There are multiple game modes, although possibly not in Rainbow Six Siege. But, everyone's split across stuff. And you're just talking about needing 10,000 active players for this to be a good enough experience. And that's why people are complaining. If there were enough people playing Rainbow Six Siege, I don't know if Rich Stanton would be complaining, because he could go on and get the game that he wanted, the kind of game that he wanted at any time. And that's just a bit crazy. I think Rocket League's a good example of a game that, we haven't seen what Rocket League is like when there aren't enough people online, because I'm sure there are still 50,000 people online at any one time, and that'll probably do reasonably well. Lag doesn't affect Rocket League too badly.
Yeah.
But this is just madness, and it also is down to like automatic matchmaking and everything. Back in the old days when it was all fields, we had a server browser, and we had to make the calculation as a person, as a player, whether to play on a sparsely populated server in Germany that we had a good lag with, or a well-populated server in, like Latvia, we had really bad lag to. And that decision was down to us, and we got to choose what made sense for us. And now it's all automatic, and it's kind of a bit like how cars now, you can't like maintain your own car. It's all a black box, and everything's like moving forward too fast, and I need to hide.
Okay. Rocket League is a good thing to bring up, especially in the context of this team thing, because Rocket League is a game that's fun when you're new. It's fun if you have a coordinated team. It's fun if you don't. It's fun if you play at the same skill level, and it's fun if you play at different skill levels. Now, I'm not saying everyone should go and do that, because that's not a thing that you can do consciously. You can't consciously make a game like that, but you can try. And I think if you've identified that your game is only fun with very skilled teams of people, and I'm looking at you, all MOBAs, then maybe that's a problem. It's clearly not a problem for MOBAs, so I don't know why I said that. It was a terrible example. But with this game, if it's really true that you need all these skilled players, you need everyone on comms, you need all of this stuff to have a good experience, that is a problem, a big problem. And learning a bit from Rocket League might be a useful thing to do.
Yeah, sure. I'll just finish off by saying that it's just one of the many decisions you have to make. No, you can't design a game that's necessarily going to be fun no matter who you're playing with, like Rocket League. That kind of thing happens once every, 5 years or something.
Yeah.
But you can make business decisions so that your risk is minimized when it's compared against these things that you can't control. And that's just exactly the case for how big your active player base has to be viable.
Yeah.
That's just one of those decisions that you have a certain amount of control over. Obviously, it depends on the genre of your game. You have a certain amount of control over, and you're just layering risk upon risk upon risk. If all of these things have to hit for you to hit, if you have to have 100,000 active players at once, if you have to have an active UGC scene, if you have to have people on YouTube playing it, you've got to understand that there should be like a median level of success that doesn't require all this stuff.
Yeah. The RPG spin-off from the horror series Five Nights at Freddy's has been withdrawn from sale on Steam, and all buyers have been refunded. The developer Scott Cawthon has said that he was unhappy with the game's reception and will work on it more before relaunching it as a free game. What do you think about this?
I think he's got too much money. This is amazing. Wow, I was really surprised by this. Especially given that this doesn't appear to be like an egregiously bad game. People seem to quite like Five Nights at Freddy's World. I was quite bemused when I heard about it originally. It sounds like quite a fun concept to make a JRPG with the characters from this really successful, weird iOS horror game. But, to have such a strong reaction, he sort of like said, I released it a month too early. It needed more work, so I'm pulling it from sale, giving everyone the ability to refund it if they want, and then giving it away for free afterwards. That's just so weird. I mean, this is what happens when you no longer have to worry about, or decide not to worry about, commercial prospects, I guess.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of the developers of these kind of games, I put Five Nights at Freddy's in the category of a game that someone makes quite quickly because they have a cool idea, and then it takes off and is carried by the community. I think the people who make those games, who don't expect to have the success, who aren't trying to make something commercial, they feel very indebted to their community. So one of the worst things for them is the community turning against them, in inverted commas. A lot of more experienced devs have said, look, he's taking this reaction far too seriously from the people who are complaining, and all he needed to do was maybe take the game off sale in a very extreme situation. Certainly not then subsequently make it free, but maybe just fix some of the stuff that was wrong. Like, give people partial refunds if you have to, have voluntary refunds if you have to. But I think he could have solved all of this by just making a post saying, hey, I got some of this wrong, like wait a couple of months and I'll fix all of this stuff, and let's go on this journey together, like other developers would do that. But you're right, like he doesn't need to do that financially, and he cares more about the reaction than he does about making money. And some people would say that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that the only kind of thing that I find a bit weird here is my reaction to it being a free game. I like have just this weird differentiator in my mind between games that people charge for and games that people give away for free. And there's something I like about the self-respect for charging for a product, and that may just be like a crazy, weird capitalist thing to say. But I would much rather that Five Nights at Freddy's World was good, and that he felt responsible for it, and he charged money for it, than it was free, and maybe in the end some stuff doesn't get patched, which I know is kind of the opposite of what has led him to do this. But I like that games cost money. I like there's responsibility on the creator's part to feel like they have to do it properly. And that's the kind of thing I like playing. You kind of know what I mean, right?
I feel like, the thing where if you make a certain kind of contract with someone, money has to be exchanged to validate the contract, often
Right.
£1. I feel like that about paid games a lot of the time. And I think I feel slightly similar to you. Making the commitment of saying, hey, this is worth money, and you need to pay me money for this, and then having someone else say, yes, I will pay you money. That, to me, is such a symbolic thing. Even if you're not doing it for money, it changes the nature of what you're doing. Now, that doesn't mean that free work is bad. Free work can be good. It can be good commercially, especially now in our current climate. It can be good for building up your followers. It can be good for something that you don't think you want to make that contract about, something that's cool and weird and maybe you don't want to work on for a long time. Making that free is fine. And also, there are arguably some successes by people making free stuff and taking donations. Some people really like that as a model. I don't personally, but who am I to say that that's right? So I agree with you. I think it would be better if he just stuck to his original plan with this and then took a really kind of a harder look at it and fixed it, rather than kind of immediately caving in and giving up and sort of trying to quickly make everything okay by changing the business model for the game. The other thing I find weird about this is it's like he's making his own bad knockoff spin-off game. Like, that's a very strange thing for someone to do who's a creative person. You can imagine a lot of creators for whom this would be their worst nightmare. So it's an interesting move creatively.
That's interesting. I mean, if I had a game that had these really strong characters in, I don't know, I might be slightly tempted to make a weird platform or JRPG with them, but I kind of know what you mean. I have to say, this harkens a bit back to our conversation about early access. You know, as the time has passed since we had that conversation, which, in all honesty, is longer for us than it is for you, the listener, I'm just more and more just completely on board with early access. I think you have to do it properly, and if you promise things that you aren't going to do, this gets you in massive trouble. And the kind of trouble that I think some people I know get really upset about on their own. Like, there are people who really hate the fact that they have promised things in their games and not delivered, and actually causes them sleepless nights. You've got to be careful about that. And I'm glad that you and me are careful about that, and we keep each other in check, and we try and make sure we don't make mistakes on that end. But if you do it properly, early access is the way to sort this stuff out. Maybe if I'm the guy that really wants the Five Nights at Freddy's JRPG, this is terrible news. I don't want him to spend a month making it a bit better and then make it free. That's the opposite of what I want. I want him to spend 9 months making it really good and then pay him £50 extra for it. That's what the fan of the genre wants.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this move is basically about his own emotional response to the situation. I mean, the guy who made Undertale was on Twitter the other day saying that he refuses to do any licensing of his characters because it would, basically cheapen them. And yet he does his own merchandise on a very small scale with one company. And he was saying, I don't want my characters to be in Walmart. And
why the hell not? I'd love my characters to be in Walmart.
I find that so weird that he has made this arbitrary line between, it's okay if I do it with one web store, but if I did it for Walmart, that would then cheapen the characters, and they're not, I don't want them to be on t-shirts. Like, to me, that's all about having a very strong emotional reaction to your own work, a very strong dedication to that, and then being thrust into this whole world of potential and sort of business stuff and just not knowing what to do with it. Like, I think if somebody got that guy and set him down and said, like, look, this is the potential of what you're doing. This is stuff that people who enjoy your work want, and it can be done in a good way, then maybe he changed his mind. But we're seeing this all the time. This is what this sudden success does. It puts people in these situations, and they're just not prepared for any of the consequences of it.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people, and I'm really not one of them, and I don't think you are either, who might be a little bit more anti-capitalist, who might have some issues with mass commercialization, and they've made a game and it's really popular, and suddenly they never thought they'd have an opportunity to put a Teddy in Walmart.
Yeah.
But they're like, the first reaction they have is you're sort of connected to that belief, and that's fine. I'm not belittling any political beliefs. If that's your political belief and you can stick with it, and you say this is because if you can come up with a really coherent reason for it, then sure, I'd love to hear it. But it just sounds patronizing to me. Like, my work is so what that I don't want the mainstream to be exposed to it. How does it cheapen your thing to be on a coffee mug? Maybe it does.
Yeah.
I mean,
why are you saying that your thing is better than all other things that do that? That's the other thing about this that I don't understand. It's, you are in a special category that means that for you this is bad, whereas for other things it's fine. The ultimate one is Bill Watterson. We both like Bill Watterson, and we both like Calvin and Hobbes, and he did that thing where he refused to do any licensing. And what is the most famous, iconic use of his character? It's that t-shirt with Calvin pissing. And that's what happens. If you don't do licensing of your characters, other people will do it on the black market, and they will be the ones.
The conversation gets more complicated when you start talking about that stuff, because if you just legitimately don't want to have any t-shirts with Calvin and Hobbes on, then I can understand being very angry that you kind of have to in order to stop other people doing
Yes.
it. I mean, not everyone is kind of as pragmatic as we are when it comes to sort of just, being happy to do the standard thing in order to stop some kind of mild bad thing happening. I think that's a bad scenario, but it kind of depends on how much of your life you want to spend fighting, black market t-shirt companies. It's like, you can be really angry life is like that, but then it's like, well, what a waste of your life to care about this thing that you cannot change.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you don't know very much about. And it reminds me a little bit of, for less silly reasons. I know a lot of people who hate that there are pictures of them on Facebook. They're not members of Facebook, but they can't stop other people, their friends in real life, having pictures of them on Facebook. And I think that's a really valid viewpoint. I totally understand and empathise with people who are angry about it. But you just can't control it. And I don't want to get too political here, because there are a lot of people for whom these kind of issues are why they want governmental change and why they want societal change. And I don't want to tread all over that. Let's bring this back to here. What I said at the beginning was pretty rude, but I still kind of stand by it. He's got enough money that he can do strange things like this on a whim, and they don't have any repercussions to him. Yep. If you need to sell teddies in Walmart to keep your mortgage repayments up, then you're going to go and do it. So that's kind of what I think about this. I think he's got to the point where he doesn't have to worry about commercial concerns, and good for him.
Also, the weird thing about this game was it was in the top 10 on Steam. Like, it's a lot of money that he is giving up. A lot, like a significant life-changing amount of money for people that he's giving up. And it's somebody's right to do that. It's their prerogative, and it doesn't matter what the consequences of that are necessarily. But it's just to make a decision like this on a personal, emotional basis, I think is a very difficult thing to do. So I suppose I respect him for that. Like, if it's going to make him happier to do this, then, fair enough. He can just do what makes him happy. But it's a bizarre situation in general. And I kind of think that I'm just with you on this. Like, it would be good for him to stick to his guns, and it would be good for him to do this properly rather than...
Yeah, actually, I'm feeling more sort of... I don't know, actually. Now I've kind of reversed my opinion. Because when I think about people... people who have 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
Like, they drag a dog out of a chimney or something, and they're famous in Iowa for 10 minutes.
Yep.
Universally, they don't do what they need to do to maximise that and make it continue if that's what they want.
Yeah.
And, Five Nights at Freddy's, maybe that'll be successful for the rest of the time, and he doesn't have to worry about money. But it always brings me back to the Flappy Bird guy, who made so much money on the App Store, 6 figures, and he thought that was all the money he would ever need. And it took him about 5 months to realise that wasn't true, and start selling Flappy Bird again after he'd taken it down.
Yeah.
So I guess the reason why I feel a little bit antagonised by this is, as someone who's trying to make games for a living as a business, employ people, etc., this is something I wouldn't do, because I think it would damage my long-term chances of succeeding, I guess.
Yeah. Right, and also the other thing is he's done... I find it so difficult when these people do inscrutable things. Like Five Nights at Freddy's, a lot of people would have just stopped, but he made however many, like 6 sequels or whatever, and they were all equally successful, and he seems like someone who's aware of the commercial side of things. That's why it's frustrating. If he was some kind of tortured artist who just didn't understand anything and was just there, and he didn't have anyone to help him, then I would feel a lot more sympathetic. But it's like he's suddenly switched off all of that awareness now because of this weird RPG.
Maybe new stuff will come out of this at a later date.
Maybe it will. Kotaku believe that NDAs are harming the games industry. Everything's harming the games industry. In a piece published this week, Rick Lane outlines the harms caused by a culture of silence and threats of legal action. Interesting article this. Are NDAs bad for all of games or just journalists?
Just journalists. I've seldom found myself so angrily disagreeing with an entire article as this. I was really surprised. This is an article about how having to sign NDAs as a game developer hurts you from the interview, because according to this guy, you can't interview passionately enough if you don't know what the thing you're interviewing for is. I mean, I generally think if you're interviewing for a position, you should probably tell the people as much as you can, but there are definitely issues there. All the way down to the fact that you could be treated badly at a games company, and because of NDAs, it doesn't get out. and lots of things like that. And all of those things are valid points in themselves as things that, are negative, but I don't particularly think they're NDA's fault per se. I think you should definitely be able to talk about your workplace environment. I don't think it should be legal to stop people talking about the workplace environment, and if it is, then something should be done about that. But I have no problem with NDAs as a thing. I'm working on an awesome new game. I don't want people to talk about it. People I'm paying or doing business with, I don't want them to talk about it before I'm ready to announce it. And I was just kind of like, none of the things made sense in terms of actual NDAs to me.
NDAs are difficult because they are just this sort of semi-unenforceable, annoying way of formalising what should be acceptable behaviour anyway. So there's many different forms that they come in. The form I encounter them in most is where you have to sign an NDA just to talk to someone at a company about what you're doing, even if you don't care about what they're doing. And that, to me, is just incredibly annoying. I don't think NDAs work very well. I don't think they cover that purpose. I've heard lots of stories of them not holding up in court in various situations. Lawyers tend to hate them and laugh at them as well. So there's that aspect to it. The thing that's really being argued for in this article that I think is most cogent is a sensible expiry date on NDAs that cover entire projects, especially projects which aren't completed. So he talks to Joe Martin, who's amazing, who's done a lot of work on games that weren't finished, like the Deus Ex game and the Abandoned Thief game. And he said it was hard to talk to developers because they were still under NDA, sometimes from companies that didn't exist anymore, sort of 10 years afterwards. Now, that is completely ridiculous. So I absolutely agree that NDAs need to have a better expiry and they have to have better termination when a company goes bankrupt or a project isn't released. So there's that. But then, yes, the other side of this, I agree with you. I think it's mostly harmful for journalists, as producer Jimmy implies in his question here. I think it's mostly about talking about games and the general culture of games that these things harm. But from a business point of view, it's just a kind of ass-covering maneuver that supposedly makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's all fair. I don't think it's particularly good that people have the ability to control their employees talking about, potentially embarrassing things 10 years later. Yeah. And I think that people should be somewhat protected from that. If I worked at a company 10 years ago and they were working on some game and it was a complete disaster area and I want to talk about it, then I should be able to talk about it. And I mean, in general at the moment, we talk about this a lot, the issues of privacy and, if someone alleges something about you online, it's incredibly difficult to defend yourself, even if it's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
But the honest truth is that 99.9% of these things that should be expired would never, ever come back to haunt you. In any way apart from the way that they would do in a non-legal way. If I talk badly about my producer from Games Company X 7 years ago, he or one of his friends may be involved in the hiring process for a post that I want, and they won't be happy that I talk badly about them. So there's still the kind of the social consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose it is possible that Activision might sue an ex-employee 10 years later for saying something silly about Deus Ex or something. I suppose that is possible and completely unacceptable. Yeah. And certainly if I lived in America rather than England, I'd feel a lot more scared about silly legal things because I have so much more faith that in England, the kind of the generally fair thing will tend to happen. But I still felt that this article was kind of overstating the evils of the NDA.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I agree with you. Like the ultimate thing is if someone's having a bad time in their workplace or something significantly worse than the bad time, and they feel like there might be some legal pressure on them not to talk about it as well as social pressure. That's obviously incredibly bad, and people do need better employment rights, and they need to be aware of their existing employment rights around that stuff. Very much so, especially these big games companies. To be honest, you can't really ever fault the statement big games companies are too controlling of their employees. I mean, that's just a truism, and anything to fight against that is good. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a bit of an overstatement here based on the annoyance of the NDA. Just a final thing here, and I suspect you probably won't disagree with this, but I generally hate rules and laws that almost everyone breaks. Like I don't like the way speed limits work. that the whole way around how speed limits work makes me really uncomfortable, even though they kind of it has a pragmatic resolution. It helps keep people's speed down and so on. That's the classic law that everyone breaks. Almost every single person breaks the speed limit at some time. And NDAs are kind of the same. Like, I've had so many NDA breaking conversations with people, breaking NDAs from their side, and I try really hard not to do it because I've signed up to something that says I can't. So I don't like a culture where you have this really hardcore thing with terrible consequences that's then just violated all the time. It's something I don't like.
Sure, I think it might be kind of a necessary part of how sort of humans deal with each other.
Yeah, it is.
But I totally understand not liking it.
Good. EA have brought their subscription program Access to PCs. Previously only available on the Xbox One, you can now pay £4 a month to get complete access to a number of games such as the Dragon Age series, Battlefield 4, The Sims, and FIFA. Is this a canny move from EA given that it works out to about £50 a year, and the intersection of the player bases of those games is probably going to be pretty low?
Yeah. Visiting the Village is generally pretty down on subscription-based game services.
Apart from PS Plus.
And I see, yes, so apart from PS Plus, which we love, but I can't see any reason to change that here. I'm kind of sort of just basically bemused by this. This is kind of such a weird offering. For your £4 a month, you get the games you mentioned. You get some FIFA games, Plants and Zombies Garden Warfare, Need for Speed game, Dead Space 2, a load of Sims games, and this War of Mine. The main thing I think when I look at this service is how like fundamentally uninteresting it is to me, and how much the engine of games runs on new stuff. It's all about what's new. Like with games, it's so newness and novelty based. Like I just kind of, these are all great games. Like these are all games that people really liked on release that got like 80 to 90%. But it's just kind of, they just feel old to me. Like, they just don't feel intriguing. And that's kind of just, and it's good for our industry that's kind of what people feel. They want something new. Obviously, the industry is moving forward at a really fast pace. But this just seems like a completely sort of boggling offering. Like, maybe there are sort of, I just don't know who this is for.
I feel like if you're going to select a bunch of games from their catalogue, that's selected for games which people who were interested in them would have bought them at the time.
Yeah.
It would be this. Like, The Sims, for goodness sake. Battlefield games, Dead Space. These are all games. If you like that kind of thing, you're going to own this game, like, already. And the problem is that when people are launching these services, they are not launching them big enough. They're not saying, this game, you will only get this if you have this subscription. I know Humble are kind of moving in that direction. I think that's one of the things that makes their service now start to look a lot more interesting than it did when it launched. They're saying, these are things you only get with this, and you're going to get access to new stuff. Yes, they've made some vague promise about you can play new EA games before they're released or whatever. Be a paid beta tester for EA, I don't know. But, like, this stuff is just so boring. There's nothing here that's going to make me jump into this, even though I don't own a lot of these games.
Yeah, this really does, for me, sort of show where Humble's kind of doing some more interesting stuff, definitely.
Yeah.
But, I think we spent a lot of time on this podcast just pointing out all of the sort of the slightly weird business moves that everyone's trying, and this comes under that heading.
It does. Talking of that, former Bush administration Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld published a game on the iOS App Store. The game is a digital adaptation of a card game taught to him by Andre Destake, who learned the game from Winston Churchill. I butchered his name, certainly. Would you rather play Rumsfeld Solitaire or Bush Early Access Survival Game?
Pretty sure it'll be Bush Early Access Survival Game. The most amazing thing about this story, and it's quite an amazing story, is that while the game was in development, and obviously Donald Rumsfeld was not programming this game,
yes.
At 83 years old, as the article is at pains to point out, he gave all his feedback via voice memos. I'm just trying to imagine being in the poor software development company and getting these, everyone having to gather round the table and listen to Donald Rumsfeld talking about how things weren't working.
Guys, it's Rumsfeld again. It's another one.
Yeah, I want to read a couple of the voice notes that are recorded here for Prosperity that development team got. "We need to do a better job on these later versions," said Rumsfeld. "They just get new glitches. We ought to find some way we can achieve steady improvement instead of simply making new glitches." So he's definitely working in games development, because that's absolutely what it is like.
Yeah.
And then this is another one. "Instead of capturing history, it's all getting a bit artsy." That's the kind of feedback I might give you. So, pretty amazing. I mean, all props to Donald Rumsfeld.
I just, like, this made me really worried. Like, making a game is the new, I'm working on a novel, isn't it? Like, it's the new thing that you do if you don't have anything to do and you want to appear like you are doing something, you work on a game. And that wasn't true 10 years ago. Like, games were things that weird nerds made in their bedroom, and now they're things that you just do, like, as a hobby, as something to do in your retirement. That's so weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is the start of a spy story. Maybe if you complete this game, then you get an invitation to join Rumsfeld's weird secret society.
That would be significantly more interesting. That's the best upsell ever, I think, for an iOS game.
So I mean, I like Winston Churchill. Everything I hear about him is awesome. I'm glad he also designed a game. It was a card game, but this is based on that. This is kind of a very weird IP. He's really kind of gone for the Winston Churchill IP with this.
Yeah.
I don't know if we tried that, and historical IP is a good thing. So. Good. Well done.
Did he have to license that from the estate of Winston Churchill?
I don't know. I suppose just the top hat and the cigar are probably hard to trademark.
But it's called Winston Churchill Solitaire,
yes, that's
isn't it?
true.
Like, Churchill Solitaire. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there'll be some controversy there. Enough of this. Richard Cobbett wrote a review earlier this week of 90s ITV kids show Nightmare as if it were a PC RPG. There's a lot of Nightmare around at the moment. Nightmare nostalgia has reached a peak in the last few years. What is it about Nightmare that has caused this?
I think it's just it's just an incredibly weird format. I actually watched an episode of Nightmare on TV a few months ago.
Yeah.
So they must have sorted out some kind of rights to it, because that's always been the reason why it hasn't been on or sold in a box set, at least.
Yeah.
And I was reminded about just how weird the whole thing is.
Yeah.
Especially I was reminded of the health bar, which is like this weird sort of weirdly coloured face slowly losing its skin.
It's terrifying.
And the producers just bring that in when they want to make people hurry up. Like it's not at all it's not deterministic. It's just whatever the producers want. And having this character wandering around this half CG, half real world location wearing a massive hat.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing was completely bizarre.
I think that for me Nightmare was so exciting because it felt like a consistent world. We talked about this before, but it felt like it had its own rules. Time froze at the end of every episode. I loved that. I loved having an explanation for why, it wasn't just happening in the background. So you thought all those people were frozen in time until next week and you came back. It was about going into a world, and that's what fantasy is about. You literally had the child put on the hat and go into this special room. And that, to me, that transition is so much more compelling than almost any other kind of game show, which has this very knowing level of artifice, whereas Nightmare just worked really hard to build that fantasy. And I think if you see something like that at the right age, I'm sure if you come to it now, it's just a kind of completely ludicrous novelty, kitschy show. But at the time when you were a kid watching this, you really felt like, maybe there was this weird land that you could go to with all these characters in it.
It's also an almost completely unique blend of technologies.
Yes.
They use sort of some quite old-fashioned special effects. They use some straightforward animation. They use some computer animation. They obviously use some models. And I think I don't think there's anything else that uses this blend of it.
Yeah.
And hand-drawn backgrounds as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what. When I first clicked on this, I thought someone had made a Nightmare actual FMV game. And that sounded like an amazing idea to me, because it pops so much. It's so different. I think someone should definitely try that.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. It was the bringing together of all of these things. They had that first-person footage of abandoned English castles shot through a filter as well, which was used for some of the transitional scenes when they got this item called the eye shield, where they would hold it and then the transitions would become that. And to me that was so weird as well. Like, it was almost like they were walking through this really threatening, weird environment that was kind of like things I'd seen before when I visited castles and stuff as a kid. So you're right, it's this combination of things, and that actually works really well for horror, because I think a lot of the reason Nightmare is so impactful is it was scary as fuck if you were a child. That health bar thing, that was the scariest thing, the massive horrible bell that tolls when someone dies. And just the fact that, you could instantly die in any room if you did the wrong thing, virtually.
It's a massively tense game. Absolutely, you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was gripping. And really, people lost as quickly as you lose. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? People could just lose straight away, and it was really weird.
I feel like structural instability is a really interesting thing in TV, and we'll probably, if we have a little bit of time, want to talk a little bit about Game of Thrones later. But that's one of the things that Game of Thrones does really well. You just don't know where you are a lot of the time when you're watching a show like that, and that's what happened with Nightmare, and that keeps things so interesting.
All right.
General Statistics news source 538 have written about the recent tennis match-fixing scandal. In particular, their article is about how it can be difficult to come to the conclusion of matches being fixed based just on suspicious betting patterns. Do you believe that BuzzFeed and the BBC made the right call here?
I think they did. If you actually look at what BuzzFeed and BBC said, it really wasn't that extreme. It was kind of like, there is match fixing in tennis, which there definitely is.
Yeah.
And there are some people at the top who are possibly involved in it, which wouldn't surprise me at all. It is hard to tell just from betting data whether a match is fixed, but I don't think it's so hard that you can't notice a pattern. Right. I find sports gambling an absolutely fascinating system, and this really does pertain to video games because, as we know, people have already been offered money to throw pro gaming matches. And this is what happens. When you're at the bottom end of a sport, you're really vulnerable to being offered £10,000, which is a huge amount of money, especially if you're like a struggling tennis player and you have to pay for all your transport, all of that nonsense. And this did make me aware of one interesting thing, which is, a lot of big players will turn up to events where they're basically paid to just turn up and then kind of unceremoniously lose in the first round because they want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Which is not the same thing, obviously, but quite
bad.
Amusing.
Yeah.
I find the idea of people sort of tracking betting patterns as a way of finding criminals really romantic.
Yeah, sure. It's a very interesting, field where you would expect the data to be so sort of noisy that you couldn't do anything with it, but actually, it really seems like there are some good indicators. I'm also glad that 538 exists, poking holes in some of this stuff. You have to have that corrective force in journalism that goes, hang on a minute, look at the actual data, look at what you're trying to imply from it. That's very good. So I like that. With tennis, it just feels like every major sport is going to have a corruption scandal. And as you say, it's kind of inevitable. I haven't followed up with this much, so I don't know if any sort of significant players have been named yet. I would guess that if that was the case, there would be yet another level of obfuscation and kind of cover-up to go through yet before we got there.
I don't think anything's happened yet. The most people have identified the people who are implicated apparently anonymously in the data, and I can't remember who the most major player is, but it's not very, very major. Like, it's not top 16 currently or anything like that. Okay. It was always thought that Djokovic might have been throwing games a long time ago, but I think it was just his gluten allergy.
Oh, right, okay. Or it might be his thing where he could just turn off his ability to play tennis at almost any point in the tennis match, despite being a true great.
Took him a while to work out how to turn it back on again.
Right, yes. I think just the fact that he's sort of had that really weird, consistent period of losing exactly the same way at exactly the same time in every match, which was quite amazing. Yeah, I don't know how you account for that. Of all the people, I would suspect Djokovic the most. I have no basis for that. And also, it's libelous.
Racism.
Let's move on.
That's the only...
A new game bundle is to be launched at the end of next month, called the Forgotten God Bundle. The aim is to provide Brian Henderson with the money he never got from winning Peter Molyneux's Tap to Win game, Curiosity. What?
Anything that is any kind of trolling or slight of Peter Molyneux, I am fully in favour of. Thus, I am fully in favour of this. Although I'm not particularly in favour of weird bundles, so I feel conflicted about this.
I can't deal with this. The best thing is Eurogamer interviewed him about it, and it seemed like he didn't really know what was going on. And then he said that he would probably go to Canada and maybe go skiing with the money. So
That's good to know.
That's just a really good response. And the logo for this thing is a kind of terrifying demon version of him done in Godda cell shading style, sort of as if he's lording his power over the entire world like a god. I mean, this is so weird.
The funny thing about this whole thing is that it's almost made the goddess thing come true.
Yes.
Because by being spurned by Peter Molyneux, he's almost become as famous as he could possibly have done from this whole ridiculous ordeal.
Yeah. And the fact that it's still going on, is the memory of the internet is long. And I think one of the things that happens, and should happen, when you promise that a prize is going to be the most life-changing and amazing prize that's ever happened in the history of humanity, people shouldn't forget that. People should be on at you about it for years into the future if it doesn't live up to that. And I feel like this is good. Like, I think this is the internet kind of trying to correct the wrongs of the world.
Sure, I mean, the great thing is they've promised some things for this bundle. Apparently it's going to include a new game in it, and it's also including a game that's never been in a bundle before. And I hope that in the true style of 22 Cans, those are completely wrong and false allegations.
Excellent. That's the end of that, and now it's time to step back in time to the games that were released this week in 2006. Now, again, I want to just raise... Yes, now, there is some doubt over this data, thanks to Eurogamer and producer Jimmy, but I like that. It's the mystery of it that's good. So we start with Zathura on the Xbox and PS2. Now, Zathura was a weird film, was it not? I think it was an attempt to make a film that was a bit like Jumanji.
Is that the Zach Braff thing?
Is it Zach Braff?
Was Zach Braff in the sequel to that?
I don't think this has anything to do with Zach Braff.
Yes, it is like Jumanji, though.
It's got Tim Robbins in it.
Good.
It's meant to be really bad. Yes, it was really bad. It was a sort of fantastical space adventure of some kind.
Okay.
Yes, so that was obviously the time for that. World Poker Tour on the GBA. A poker game on the GBA sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I bet I can guarantee the AI for it's terrible. I'm just gonna make that bet right now.
Yeah. Torino 2006 Winter Olympics on the Xbox, PS2 and PC. I didn't know the Winter Olympics were in Torino ever. Ford Racing 3 on the GBA. DT Racer on the PS2. It's a good week for racing, clearly. Dead or Alive 4 on the Xbox 360. Now, you liked the original Dead or Alive, did you not?
No, I like the film.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We both
really
like
funny.
the film. The film is amazing. Yes, it's definitely in the category of so bad it's good on some level.
Absolutely. It's
quite
really
watchable.
entertaining. Like, that's like a top quality ludicrous film.
It's a seriously ludicrous film. And Big Mother Truckers on the GBA. I'm slightly surprised I managed to get that name past Nintendo.
Yeah, I thought this was still in Nintendo's really tight-assed period. So.
I think it was.
Maybe they didn't get it.
We release ourselves from the shackles of 2006 and bound enthusiastically to the present day with the top 10 UK Steam games, and we begin at number 10 with Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 9 is Black Mesa, 50% off. Now that's the Half-Life 2 mod thing, isn't it? Black Mesa.
Yeah, but that's now released as a standalone thing with Valve's blessing, I think.
I need to play that. Darkest Dungeon, number 8. Good to see Darkest Dungeon hanging around. It's been getting some good reviews. Clearly they recovered from their early access difficulty, so we're very happy about that. Yep. Number 7, XCOM 2 on pre-order. XCOM 2 is this week, I think. Is that right? Or is it 2 weeks time or something? Oh,
I don't know. I know Bin pre-ordered it with the money I got him for Christmas.
Good. Excellent. Yes. I'm looking forward to XCOM 2 quite a lot, actually. I'm going to play that on launch. Counter-Strike Go, number 6. Battlefleet Gothic Armada, number 10 on pre-order. Now, this is from Focus, I believe.
Is that right?
Yes, I think
so. From the same guys who publish
Blood Bowl.
Blood Bowl. Yeah, because I was going to say I was slightly surprised by that being so high on pre-order.
Yes,
but if it's them,
it is
fair enough.
Focus Home, Warhammer 40k. It's an RTS. It's the era of the new RTS, man. Like, it's kind of an interesting...
Apparently.
Yeah, interesting. Warhammer 40k Eternal Crusade at number 4. So it's a good week for Warhammer as well. 20% off, that's just been released. I don't know anything about that, as it happens. I'm sure you don't either.
No, I don't, although, I mean, I kind of feel very mixed about what Games Workshop have done with their licensing, so I suppose it's good that they're still getting some good results.
Yeah, that's certainly a big result. Number 3 is Tom Clancy's The Division pre-order. I'm hearing some quite good things about that as well. Journalists have been talking generally about sort of how fun the interactive environments are, which is interesting.
With this and the next game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, I'm kind of just massively alienated by these kind of games nowadays. They're just like kind of the last thing that I'm likely to play. I don't know what it is exactly, but the kind of big budget cross-platform adventure and FPS stuff just leaves me completely cold right now.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed Blops so much that I'm kind of a bit more open to this kind of thing now. I found the thing that really got me in this genre was Deus Ex Human Revolution, which I just hated because of all the AAA stuff. Whereas I feel like you have to just embrace some of the daftness of it. It really is like going to see like a big budget superhero movie. You know, there are ways in which you can enjoy that, and that's what I will try and do if I play this game. Yeah, number 2, Rise of the Tomb Raider. As you said, I've never been interested in Tomb Raider games. They've never been something that have interested me. I don't really like third-person jumping, I guess. Yeah. Number 1 is The Witness. So
let's talk about The Witness.
Let's talk about The Witness. So we both played a bit. I think you played about 40 minutes or so, and I played about an hour or so. I was expecting to like this game not at all, because I don't really like puzzle games, and I wasn't that attracted by the art style. I found that the puzzles... so if you haven't played the game, what happens is you walk around this island, there are these puzzles which are on screens everywhere, and the puzzles are sort of a combination of mazes and also logic problems, like needing to go past every point while solving a maze. So kind of standard geometrical logic problems. I found the puzzles themselves and the interface for the puzzles quite pleasing. It's quite relaxing to do them. I didn't really understand how the puzzles were affecting the world. The first few blocks of them you don't really seem to do anything, and you feel a bit deflated and let down, like maybe you shouldn't have done them, or it was a waste of time. And then you wander around and sort of the twists on the formula start happening, and I'm a bit nonplussed by it, really.
Yeah, I'm pretty down on this. And I may just be more down on it than you just because I had higher hopes for it.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I was really interested by the idea of Jonathan Blow's Myst. And I don't think that the puzzles themselves are necessarily a problem. If the puzzles were well integrated into the world in an exciting way, then I think that puzzles could be enough. Although they're definitely sort of on the simplistic end for me. They're definitely hard, and if you like going through massive Sudoku books, then I kind of imagine that you might be totally on board with this. They don't really work for me particularly well, but I don't think they're like the fundamental problem. But as you said to me on text last night, yes, we text each other. The world feels completely inert.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like what you're doing actually has any impact. The starting area has a bunch of wires, like leading from and to these puzzle stations, which kind of make it look like something interesting might happen.
Yeah.
But it's just missing, like, for me, the great thing about Portal is this antagonistic relationship with the person who's talking to you, and the fact that you're trapped and you're trying to escape. And this is such a driving force, and you're trying to work out what's going on because you're trapped, because you're trying to escape. And The Witness, like, I just kept thinking the driving force behind it was about to come in. Like, I was still in the tutorial area, but then it got to the point where I just couldn't be bothered to do these puzzles because the puzzles were getting more layered and layered and layered, kind of crazy. And that's fine, but it had done nothing to make me want to do them because I thought something interesting would happen next beyond the next puzzle.
I think that there's definitely a strong idea of this lack of feedback to the player. So what he's doing is he's kind of taking a traditional game design idea that you need to keep rewarding the player and turning it on its head. Now, it's useful to examine things like that. And a lot of forms are based around challenging the sort of supposed preconceived notions of the existing forms and so on. But I feel like when you do something that's that well known for motivating someone and making them enjoy the process, when you take that away, you have to have a really good reason for it. And nothing I've seen in this game so far has made it possible for me to conceive of a reason that's good enough, be it conceptually, narratively, or from a design standpoint, that's going to justify the penalty that you incur from doing that.
What makes you think it's a conscious decision and not just like a lack?
Because it's so clearly deliberate. The game is a very crafted game, and the first thing that you do after you get out of the tutorial, if you solve one of those big boards, the traditional thing would be to have some massive thing happen, or to start the story there, or to do something like that. That's just the most received wisdom ever. If you're a game designer who thinks about design as much as Jonathan Blow does, you would know that. So it has to be conscious.
So your position is that this is what he wants to explore with this game, a lack of feedback to the player.
Yes.
I find that really interesting. I have two problems with that. The first is that I think it's a very stupid thing to want to explore. Like trying to explore cinema that doesn't have any visuals.
Well, it's not. It can't be inherently stupid. Because, as I said, the way that you develop things is by challenging some tenets of those things, right? It can't be stupid on its own. It's only stupid if it doesn't work or do anything.
I guess I just mean I don't like it. I think that it's sort of like trying to make a cake without sugar or something, or make food that tastes bland, for instance. I know that it's totally fine. Again, like I guess you're thinking about Godot here. You can play with things that are fundamentally generally against what good stuff is. But it's an extremely bold thing to do when you start doing it that seriously.
Yeah.
So then the question is, you seem to be quite strongly believe that this is the case because it's so clear that it's lacking.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm on board with that, because I think it's just such an insanely weird thing to do, and I'm just a bit unclear that that's what he's spent the last sort of 6 years and $4 million doing. Like, it's such a beautiful looking island. Like, there's clearly feedback involved. You have some weird feedback. I guess I'm kind of just intrigued to just play it more to find out how much I buy that this is Jonathan Blow's reflection on feedback in video games.
Well, it just necessarily has to be true because of the varying nature, as you say, of the feedback that you get from doing the different things. I mean, it's so clearly something that's being played with from the outset. That, I mean, just the simple fact that, I guess as a spoiler, there's a sequence of puzzles that you do in the same way, and then in the middle, you stop being able to do it because one of the colours doesn't work because you don't have enough power, and then you then have to think about that in a different way. So it's very overtly about getting the player to try and think about the reaction of the environment to their actions. And a lack of feedback or non-obvious feedback, varying types of feedback. You say that the puzzles don't relate to the environment. I've done some puzzles where every time you do one, something about the building you're in changes, and then you have to go in. So it seems to me so transparently obvious to be playing with these formal ideas from the start. That's why I'm saying, I don't see how it can make that interesting. To me, it's just a given that is something that's happening and happening, even irrespective of intention, that's happening in the game. But I can't see why.
There's a big difference between playing with the kind of feedback you get and playing with a lack of feedback. I feel like those two things feel different to me. Like, sure, at the beginning, you are trying to power the door to open the exit to the first stage, and there's another bit by the sea where it's sort of this. You eventually uncover some weirdly drawn note, and some bit of the building opens when you do some puzzles. But again, I don't think it's automatically true that he's playing with the idea of what it would be like to give you surprisingly little feedback, just because he's playing with feedback in general.
That seems to be a sort of very odd and fine point, especially given that literally happens. Like, you do one of the same sequence of things and nothing happens afterwards. whereas in other times it does. It just seems like that has to necessarily be a component of this idea of playing around with the...
Yeah, but sure, is it one facet of like a 1,000 different kinds of feedback he's playing with it, or is it about the lack of feedback as like the thing that it's mainly about?
Well, I mean, that's not possible to know until you've finished it, really.
So that's the thing, though. If it's about that, then it's not necessarily fair for me to criticise the fact that I think that you don't get enough feedback and enough plot and stuff. But if it's not just about that, then I think it's incompetence rather than some kind of artistic thing. Or, maybe not even incompetence, but it feels like such a kind of empty, generally unchanging world, not like literally unchanging, that it feels very much like a level select screen rather than a place that I'm exploring or like a story that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a facet of what's happening overall without that invalidating anything I'm saying. It doesn't have to be the entire focus. Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't feel like there's any... I'm not interested in what's happening on the island. And that, to me, is the biggest flaw. Like, I don't think it's consciously about making you not interested in what's happening on the island, because the island is framed in such a way as it would assume that you are interested in it. So therefore, I assume that the intention here, and it doesn't really matter we're talking about intention so much, but anyway, is that I want to explore this thing and do more puzzles. And I guess I kind of want to do some more puzzles, but as soon as that thing happened with it not working in the middle, I was like, well, you just took my puzzles away. So you're telling me that I should be doing this, and I was getting into it, and now I just hate it, and I hate you, and I don't care about where this power comes from or figuring out the secondary thing, because I don't care. It's not interesting.
The thing is, it's got reasonably good reviews, and I keep wanting to play enough, because right now I actually think it's kind of I actually do kind of think it's bad right now. Like, if it's just like this for the whole thing, then I think as a very expensive, very long in development game that's supposed to be like an interesting game in a larger thing, as opposed to just being an iOS puzzle game, I think it's kind of failing at that for me right now. So I keep wanting to play it more. There's a subtitles option in the options menu,
right?
Which would definitely, and you said you've come across an audio recording,
yes.
So I definitely haven't seen enough to like write it off yet. It could just start massively slowly, or that's not the impression that I'm getting.
No, I don't think it does.
But yeah, I'm just kind of really slightly. I'm a little bit surprised by the reviews I've seen so far, based on my experience with the product.
The audio thing I heard was basically a kind of fairly over-elaborate fumbling exegesis of something to do with the ontological argument for the existence of God. So it's a philosophical kind of speech. And it was about perception and the idea of kind of omniscience. And that's fine. It was just a kind of abstracted bit of text. It was okay. It was performed okay. And I listened to it and went, oh, okay, so there's some themes about perception and the witness, and obviously, fine, okay, I get that. I feel like either what it's going to say is going to be so oblique as to not really have any weight, or it's going to be so clangingly obvious that making that point over 40 hours of these puzzles is not going to be interesting to me. That's the problem I have. If it could show me something now that was going to resolve that, then I would really, really like it, and I'd want to push on. But I have a feeling what I'm going to do is play the bit that I'm in now, where you have to repeat stuff if you get something wrong. I'm going to play that a couple more times and go, yes, I understand that this is tedious, and then just stop playing it, because there's no need for me to push past that tedium.
It's number 1 on Steam.
Yep.
I presume it's doing well on PS4.
Yep.
However, the budget of this is so high that I don't think we know yet if it's going to break even. Being number 1 on Steam right now is extremely good.
Yeah.
And I would say would lead me to believe that it will do.
Yes.
But it's very expensive. So, congratulations to John Blow in general.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that I'm disappointed. I think we've got to wrap this up shortly. The similarities between this and Fez in terms of like an event are pretty strong to me. Their creators are both sort of auteurs of various popularity.
Yeah.
John Blow and Phil Fish. They both took ages. They've had a tortured development cycle and have been covered a lot off and on during the development cycle. They're both kind of puzzle games where the core mechanics are wrapped up in a lot of aesthetic stuff. And I mean, I found both sort of basically a bit disappointing, although I think I like Fez a lot more.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I think that there's got to be an article in that comparison.
Definitely. I'm also happy with this kind of, in a meta way, you know, that someone of his profile can spend 7 years making a game, spend a lot of money on it, come up with this ludicrously high concept thing, say it's for people who read Gravity's Rainbow, which is an astonishing quote, post a picture of their own urine on Twitter. You know, I'm happy about all of these things. And John Blow gets a bit of a bad rep, I think. But he's a very outspoken man, and he's very opinionated. But he's a nice guy, actually, as well. So I'm happy that it's doing well. I'm happy that he's justified in his kind of craziness. But I just don't... It's not anything.
Well, there's another link between these two things, because Jonathan Blow posts a picture of a bottle of his pee.
Yes.
And I have peed next to Phil Fish. Right, we're going to wrap this up now.
Yes, that's wise.
Because I have to go, and this has been a good episode.
It has.
But I do want to talk to you about Game of Thrones Season 4.
Okay.
But let's leave that until next episode.
We'll keep that on the docket. Right, that's enough from us. Thank you very much for listening. This is probably quite a long episode. You can follow me on Twitter at Mode7Games. He's Ian Hardingham, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye!
Thank you, and goodbye.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.